Hey guys, what's up? How's it going? Mustafa Talib here with Filmmaking Productions, and welcome to Real Time, where we are live talking about film and television and everything in between. Today's guest is somebody who I looked up to and inspired me to get into the filmmaking industry, and that is Brother Murad, who is based out of LA. And we're going to talk about his journey going the independent route and seeing what is coming up in his future. Let's get right into it. Hey there, everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Once again, Mustafa Talib here with Cinemaking Productions, and thank you for tuning in to Real Time. Like I mentioned, today's episode is going to be interviewing somebody who I looked up to, who has inspired me to enter filmmaking and, showed me the ropes, basically, from the very get-go on how to tell stories visually. And so without further ado, please help me welcome one of my mentors, Murad. You are on, my friend.
Hey everybody, how you
How's it
doing,
going,
Mustafa?
bro? Doing
Going
great,
good.
bro.
You
How
know,
are
all
things
things
out in
considered.
LA? Yeah, all things considered, how are things
All
in
things,
LA, man?
yeah, all things considered, not bad, not bad. Doing okay, staying busy. We're trying to at least. The entertainment
Hmm.
industry is kind of on an indefinite pause,
Right,
but
they're on
but
hold.
doing all right. There's always something. There's always something going on. So I always find something to keep myself busy with. But
That's
alhamdulillah,
good.
I'm doing
That's
well,
good.
doing good.
Alhamdulillah, that is great. I mean, just touching up on that a little bit. I guess, how have you been able to adjust? Being a filmmaker, like not being on set. How have you been keeping busy during this time?
Well, it coincided actually nicely with a career shift that I'm making anyway. I'm nothing against being on set, but kind of over it. So
Mm-hmm.
right now in an attempt to sort of shift my career to being. Right now, I'm primarily a producer and a director, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to shift away from directing and being primarily producing and writing. So basically,
Gotcha.
just creating stories and then handing it off to a director or a producer who would do things on set and take care of things from that end. So really, I'm trying to be more on the conceptual end and on the
Mm-hmm.
storytelling end, and not so much in the actual production end anymore. So I don't
Okay.
mind not being on set.
Of
Um,
course, it's always fun.
yeah, uh, being on set is fun. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Sure.
sometimes.
For some, I think it is, and it can be. Even for me, it can be. But I don't mind not being on set. I don't mind focusing on just writing the story and then handing it off to a visual, storyteller to take my story and give it you know, give it his or her own vision.
Of
So
course, and I think that is like you said, it does work perfectly. And with being in quarantine and stuff, you can
yeah,
be, I guess, remote, so you can
yeah.
just
You
work
could
on your
write from
even
anywhere. So
exactly.
yeah,
And I think that's beautiful. With technology.
yeah.
So I guess let's wind the clock a
Sure,
bit back, and
sure.
I guess if you could just briefly introduce yourself.
Briefly.
Yes.
Sure. I'm Murad, born and raised in LA. I'm a storyteller. I've always been a storyteller ever since I was a kid. Just different forms of storytelling through my entire life. So that's in brief. If there's
That's
anything
in
in
brief.
specific you want to know,
Sure. So let's stretch it out just a little bit more than
sure.
that. I guess what inspired you to get into filmmaking in general? Was it just the nature of being in LA, Hollywood, the movie scene, etc., or
Yeah,
was it
you might
something
think
else?
that. One might think that, as though I grew up here. I actually did grow up. I mean, Universal Studios was like basically my backyard.
Nice.
I grew up. He's probably about maybe a 15-minute drive from Universal Studios. So it was around, but no, I don't think it was because I grew up in LA. I kind of always have really been a storyteller. I mean, I started writing stories when I was a kid, just to
Mm-hmm.
kind of keep myself entertained and keep my friends liked it and my family members liked it, and I would always like make up stories and tell stories and things like that. Just even off the freestyle, so to speak, where I wouldn't even write. I would just be sitting there and just make up a story, and everybody would all of a sudden be engaged in that. Um, I almost want to call it a power, as a as a
Mm-hmm.
as a child it was gratifying, and it was something that I really it impacted me a lot as a kid to be able to just have that power to, no one's listening to me, no one's paying attention to me, and all of a sudden I tell the story, and now I have this captive audience, whether it was 5 people in the room or 50 people in the room, now all of a sudden everybody's listening to me, and I got them hanging on every word I'm saying. And at that young age, I kind of developed the ability to just sort of naturally to sort of set something up and grab someone's attention, and then string them along, and then boom, you have your payoff at the end of the story, whether it was a joke with a punchline or whether it was, whatever it was. So in high school, I kind of got into theater a little bit. I was not a theater geek. No disrespect to theater geeks. I love theater geeks, but I wasn't really in that crowd. I took a couple of drama classes. I did debate, and I did what they called the Toastmasters. So the idea is always that I was always in front of people presenting something, whether it was acting or debating or mock trial I did as well, or Toastmasters or whatever it is. I was always engaging people in some sort of, it was delivering something to a group of people where I was trying to capture their attention. And then my senior year in high school, I actually wrote a play just for fun. It was a comedy. It was a whodunit based on we used all characters that were actual faculty and teachers at the school. Right? That's what I wrote. Nice. One of the teachers goes missing, and it was a fun, just comedy sort of whodunit. And I submitted it to the teacher that ran the theater department. He was like, "This is hilarious. I love it. Let's do it." And I got to direct that play, and it was great. It was fantastic. I loved it. And then moving into college, I still did it for fun. I still wrote short stories. I wrote poetry. I wrote screenplays, short screenplays, plays, stage plays, things like that. It was all really just for fun. I did it with the MSA. I did it with the Islamic Center youth group that I used to attend. But it was really just fun. I went into college as a political science major.
Nice.
And I didn't have
any
any
intention.
You say that. Yeah, I had no intention of turning it into a career.
Yeah, I end up having to switch to poli-sci to graduate.
Okay. Yeah, I did. I flipped. I did the opposite. Yeah.
Right.
But eventually, I took, as part of my political science track, I took a journalism class. And I liked it. And then the guy who was running, and then as part of journalism, I had to take a production class. And there was the guy who taught that class was like, you're really good at this. Why don't have you thought of majoring in film? And I'm like, that's a thing. You can do that. I mean, growing up in our community, I didn't even know it was a thing to major in filmmaking at the time. You're talking early 2000s is when I was in college. 2000, 2001, 2002 is when I was in college, so I didn't even know that you could do that. So I immediately switched to being a film major. My parents were thrilled.
Oh, you say it sarcastically.
Did my sarcasm not come through?
No, I didn't pick it up, but I get it now.
Okay. Oh yeah, they were
so
ecstatic.
Thrilled.
No, my mom was, whatever you want to do, typical mom. But my dad was like, "What are you going to do with that?"
Right. There's no money.
Yeah, exactly. Fast forward, by the way, 20 or so years later, and now every little video I make gets spread around through every family member we have in Jordan. So, so now
my
he's
son,
of course
he did this
exactly. Even if it's just some cheesy little 30-second ad that I did for some product that I don't even care about. Everybody, I saw that commercial you did. Everybody in Jordan sees it. I'm like, okay, well that's cool. So he's definitely he's proud now. But when I first told him at the time, he wasn't very happy. But yeah, I majored in film, and I ended up graduating from CSULA in 2005 with a degree in television film production. Primarily in documentary filmmaking. That was kind of what I gravitated towards, again, because of the political science sort of background, and I was very into social, political awareness and things like that. So initially, when I first got into it, it was very political, very, social awareness, political awareness, that type of thing. I wasn't really telling fun, silly stories. I was, in my opinion, looking back at myself at that time, I was a bit heavy-handed. Maybe very heavy-handed, not a bit. I was very sort of forceful with the messages that I was trying to send here. Look at this cause, everybody. We all need to focus on this cause. So I've become a lot more subtle and a lot more nuanced with the way that I approach. And honestly, just better at storytelling, in the way that I approach things. People want to tell stories. I've said this many times before. It's one of the things that I really like to say is that nobody relates with a cause. People don't relate with a cause. People relate with people. So I've now been in the habit of really telling sort of human stories as opposed to a story about a cause. So I've also transitioned a bit away from documentary. I still do it from time to time, but I'm doing a lot more narratives nowadays as well. So I graduated in 05, so we're talking, it's been 15 years since I finished school.
That's amazing. That is awesome. And along that time, somehow, we crossed paths at one point when I was a very young lad. And I remember, I think you had done a workshop here in Dallas, and I attended that. And that's what, I guess, sparked me more to get into filmmaking and things like that.
I'm sorry. No,
yeah. But I do honestly, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you so much, because you did set me on a path of inspiration and hopefully helping others and telling other people's stories as well. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely, man. The more of us that are out there telling our stories, the better. So like I'm glad I was able to inspire you. I hope you inspire 100 more.
I hope so too.
We got to get out there telling our own stories. If we don't tell our stories, who's going to tell our stories?
Absolutely. And just a quick break, if y'all are watching, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have that post notification turned on so you know when new content is coming out, either in narrative or anything like that, if y'all are interested. So greatly appreciate that. Moving on, I guess, could you tell me, in your opinion, what is the difference between a filmmaker and a videographer?
There's definitely a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray there, because filmmakers often do cross over into being videographers, and videographers cross over into being filmmakers. But I will say that a filmmaker, there's a lot of different ways that one can be a filmmaker. You can be a writer and be a filmmaker. You can be an editor and be a filmmaker. Well, I guess you can be a videographer and be a filmmaker too. But videography, it's seen as more of a sort of work for hire type of thing. Right. You hire a videographer to shoot your wedding. You hire a videographer to cover your live event. You can even hire a videographer to shoot a commercial for you or something like that too. You don't hire a filmmaker to do those things. That being said, I know a lot of filmmakers who, their day job is being a videographer, and a lot of videographers who moonlight as filmmakers. So there's a lot of crossover. I've done both in my career and in my life. And, I won't lie about it. The videography thing was to pay the bills. You got to pay the bills. This is my skill set. This is what I know how to do. I'm good at it. And nobody's hiring me to do a $20 million film. But this organization over here needs me to cover their event. Okay, sure, I'll cover the event. Now, in that capacity, I'm a videographer or a video producer, whatever, it's all semantics.
Right, the term is all thrown around.
It's all thrown around, yeah. But was my goal, for example, just speaking for myself, to be a videographer? No, that was never my goal. It was just, got bills to pay.
Right. And so let's talk about that for a little bit. I mean, having a career in this field, it's not easy, right? There's always the whenever you're initially starting, it's the I'm the starving artist. I have a passion in my craft, but at the same time, at the end of the day, I have bills to pay. I want to have a family, and you need money to have a family, to support that family. So how do you make it work? What mindset do you have to put yourself in to do that?
I don't think there's no one right answer to that. I think
Sure,
I can only
course.
tell you
this
what
is all your opinion. Your
well, it's not even my opinion. It's just my own personal experience. But my personal experience doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you or anybody else. So it's an art. So getting into the arts, there's no one. Especially nowadays, there's so many different doors that one can get into this industry through. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, it was different. There was still more than one door, but there was maybe 2 or 3. Now there's like 50, 100 different doors that you can get into this industry through.
With the birth of social media.
Yeah, through social media, through so many other avenues and means. You can live stream. Yeah, I mean, these streaming services are changing the game now, and there's a lot of different ways to get in. But my own personal experience is that that's pretty much what I did. Is I made my my 9 to 5, so to speak, was videography. It was basically, I didn't really do too many weddings, to be honest. I did 1 or 2, and I hated it. I'm just to be completely honest, I couldn't stand it. And I once I did 1 or 2 of them, I kind of it didn't matter what I was being offered. I never took another wedding after those 1 or 2. But I did do videography in terms of I covered a lot of events. I did a lot of videos, fundraising videos for like nonprofits and Islamic organizations and things like that.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of videography in that capacity, and that basically paid my bills. I had the equipment, I had the skill, I had the knowledge, I had the know-how, and I had the network. People knew me in the community. I knew people in the community, so it just kind of ended up working out that way. That's not to say that that's all. Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but like
No.
I mean, was it niche that you stayed within the Muslim community, or did you end up branching out to, I guess, the general community to do your work as well?
In the videographer capacity, I didn't do much branching out. A bit, but you're going to work within what your network is, and I spent a long time, whether intentionally or unintentionally, sort of building a network within the community. I was very involved with a lot of different Islamic organizations from way back when I was in college, so. It's just sort of the network that I built, and I worked within that network. I branched out of it a bit, and even when I branched out, it was referrals from people within the community. But I actually never advertised. I never advertised. I never put ads out. I never did online ads. It was just all word of mouth. And pat myself on the back a bit, I guess. I was good.
There's something to be proud of.
So so I'd never had to advertise. People were very, very satisfied with my work. So I get a lot of repeat clients, and then those repeat clients would refer me to their friends and colleagues, which were not from the community. And then, my network started to grow a little bit in the video producer, work for hire sort of capacity. And I have made a decent living doing it, but it was never my passion. It was never what I got in the game for. The whole other side of it was on the entertainment end, which is why, I don't ever recommend for someone to, again, follow the same path as me. You don't have to do the videography thing to get into the entertainment thing.
Right.
They're completely separate industries. You can make frappuccinos at Starbucks and be working on your craft as a filmmaker, whether it's a writer or a director or whatever form of storytelling you want to do. You could be cutting hair. You could be doing anything. It's just, for me, I chose to do the videography thing, for better or worse. But that was my... Essentially, I was making frappuccinos at Starbucks. That's all that was for me. That's all it was. That was just a means for me to support my family. The filmmaking thing, the entertainment thing, was on a completely different track, and that was a much, much, much slower track. That I'm still working on. That's a journey that I'm still on. But it's been progressing. It's definitely been progressing since I finished school in 2005. So
that's awesome. Also, guys, just real quick, if y'all have any questions regarding filmmaking or independent filmmaking, leave them in the comments down below in the live chat, and I'll be checking them out. And if you want to direct it to me or Murad, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. So moving on, I guess this question comes from like a DIY perspective. Is it all about the gear?
No. As a videographer, sure, yeah, it is. You've seen those sort of the wedding videographers. They all have those. At the end of the day, they're all the same angles. It's all the same, cheesy, whatever, camera movements and transitions, blah, blah, blah. And lens flares and whatever and all this other stuff. So, yeah, as a videographer, I would say if your goal is to be a videographer, get some really, really good gear. And then market yourself like, hey, look, I have this camera, I got this, I can do this, I can do that. Yeah, it really is. Your gear and your network. But as a filmmaker, no. I haven't even bought gear. The last time I bought any equipment has probably been close to 10 years now since the last time I bought anything, because I've been pushing myself in that direction of being a filmmaker, getting in the entertainment industry. And, you think Christopher Nolan walks around with like
an IMAX on his shoulder?
Yeah, exactly. Or Spielberg walks around with a little DSLR camera in his bag. I mean, maybe for fun, but it's not how he makes his movies. So, as a filmmaker, essentially at the end of the day, you're a storyteller, and you bring in a team of people to help you tell that story. Some of those people have the equipment. Some of those people have the talent, the on-camera talent, the behind-the-camera talent. But at the end of the day, you're telling a story. People want to hear you tell a story. The visual aspect, of course, absolutely is a part of that visual story. Is a part of that storytelling. But that's where you bring in cinematographers, you bring in production designers, you bring in whatever team or whatever crew you want to bring. But if your goal is to be a videographer, stock up on as much gear as you can. If your goal is to be a filmmaker, work on your craft as a filmmaker. Then work on your ability to tell stories. whether it's
And
writing or
work with
directing or
what you
whatever it is.
got.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Work with what you got. I mean, I've seen amazing stories that were shot on like garbage cameras, but I'm engaged. Why am I engaged? Because the story's good.
The story is amazing.
The story's good. The characters are captivating. There's an arc. You have complex characters that make me, think and that engage me, and then I want to know what's going to happen to this character and how the arc is. It's, if you engage me, I don't care what you shot the thing on. If you engage me. Now, is that going to end up being a huge blockbuster film, that the thing that you shot on a garbage camera? Probably not, but it could get you some attention. And that's what I've noticed in terms of my career
blocks.
In the entertainment industry. Some of the things that have gotten the most attention from me are not the best looking. They were not the ones that were technically done to the best quality. They were the ones that told the best stories. Those were the ones that got the most attention, and that would send me on into the next level of my career path in the entertainment industry.
Awesome. These are fantastic answers. Thank you again so much for
sorry if I'm long-winded. I apologize.
No. You're these are brilliant. Like I hope, again, like the point of the show is to bring people who are in the field and to relay it as it is, to speak the truth, like not sugarcoat it, or like you're in the industry, you're on the ground, you've been doing the work, and so you have the invaluable knowledge, right, to share and advice, and that's what I want to create this show for. And
sure,
so,
and I'm happy to do it. I'm still learning myself too. So if anybody out there has any advice for me to take, that's how you become better at what you do, is you learn from others. I could learn from you. I could learn from anybody in the I don't have to learn from people who are older, more experienced. So. Yeah.
True. Moving on, I guess you did touch upon this just in the beginning when you said you were in the documentarian type of path. But what stories did you want to tell specifically?
At that time or now?
I guess you could talk about both. Since just over time things evolve and things change, so you could talk about both.
Well, sure. I can. I could tell you about the first few films that I made that got some attention. I did a film when I was in school. It was actually my thesis film called Last Refuge, and it was basically about how a lot of leaders within the Muslim community were targeted after September 11th. And it featured some fairly high profile names in there, and their family members, people who were arrested, people who were detained, people who were deported for no reason really, harassed, and people whose homes were basically broken into SWAT team style and things like that. It was a short documentary. It was about, I want to say, 11 or 12 minutes long, and it filmed. So I entered it into the Student Film Festival, and it won Best Documentary that year. And that was my first one, and from there actually after that, once I graduated, I got really into the online thing. I started doing. I had a few videos go viral before going viral was even a thing.
Right.
2007. My first video went viral in 2007. It got 2.5 million views, which by today's standards is like 2.5 million. Whatever. That's it. But in 2007, to get 2.5 million views on something was a big deal.
The boom of YouTube.
It was in the early days of YouTube. Before Google bought it, actually.
Right. It was 2005 was, I think, YouTube was launched. And Google had not acquired it until like maybe 2008, 2009, something to that effect.
Something. So I had within that period of time I got into YouTube around 2006. And I had between 2006 and 2009, I had probably about 3 videos go what you would call at that time at least viral, anywhere between 1 million and 2.5 million. The most that I had was 2.5 million, which that video is still up now and has probably about maybe 5.5 million now. But the rest of that was acquired over the past 12, 13 years. But initially, within the first few months that it was up, it had gotten 2.5 million views. So, but those were, again, they were very Islamic. They were very religious. They were very addressing discrimination against Muslim Americans. Things like that. It was a bit preachy. If I'm being a bit self-critical, but they were very preachy. They were very sort of in your face, sort of, oh, poor us, poor Muslims, don't stop judging us, stop targeting us, and it was that type of thing, which for the time maybe was fine. And then I did another documentary, my first feature-length documentary, which was released in 2014. That was called The Tortured: Stories of Survival, in which I profiled 5 people from around the world, different circumstances, different time periods, that were victims or survivors, as they prefer to be called, survivors of torture by various governments from around the world. From a Syrian Canadian man who was in a Syrian prison, sort of renditioned by the Canadian government over to Syria. A Vietnam War veteran who had spent 7 years as a POW in Vietnam, U.S. Veteran. A woman from El Salvador who was part of the Communist Party in El Salvador in the 70s. Bad time to be a communist in El Salvador. So things like I showed the similarities between all of these folks that had been tortured. So since then, I've done a number of documentaries that have aired on Middle East networks. I've done some things that have been on Al Jazeera. I've done some things for some Egyptian TV networks. Those are sort of more work for hire type of things where there's already a producer and they're trying to do a documentary and they need the documentary to be done here. So I would work with them to get that done. But like I said, over the years now, I'm very, very much shifting away from documentary and doing things more that are narrative. I'm doing some series. I'm doing some films. And I'm still doing documentary as a work for hire. But that's just, somebody, has a documentary film that they want to do and they need me to produce it for them, direct it for them, whatever it is. Yeah. I'll jump on board and help them out with it. But in terms of me coming up with my own, this is the film that I want to make, I've shifted away from documentary at this point.
Okay. Yeah. And so you said you're doing more narrative, like, and just on the writing and producing side of that, like, what? I mean, that kind of goes into my next question, like, or not exactly. So, what big projects have you worked on? I guess in the past.
Big is a very relative term. So
sure.
What do you mean?
I would say, big? I guess, in your perspective, the most successful.
Successful is a relative term. Man. So what do you mean by? Do you mean how many people watched it? Do you mean the size of the network that it was on? Do you mean how much I got paid?
I guess what I'm trying to
how much
say,
the project made?
Right. So I guess those are all good. Those are all different factors. But I guess what are the ones that I guess got most recognition? Let's go with that.
The Tortured got a lot of recognition from the human rights world. So Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch both recognized the film. The ACLU actually sponsored a screening of the film. It was featured on KPFK or Pacifica Radio. Had featured segments of it. And I was actually brought on as a guest at the time. So yeah, it's been was it the ACLU? Yeah, I believe the ACLU actually had sponsored a whole screening in Sacramento where they had me come up and we did that. So that one had some success in that capacity. I've worked on documentaries that have been on Al Jazeera, but I was not the director. I would have been one of the producers. So those have been seen by, I don't know, probably millions of people. But no one would know. Be like, oh, that's Murad's film. It wasn't like that was a part of a team of producers. That was the main producer here in the U.S. For those films. There's been a number of those.
Have you won any awards for any of your projects?
I have. I did some horror films, which I know you're like, okay. Well, some people might be scratching their head. So you do all this like Islamic stuff, and you do all this like documentaries, socio-political stuff, and now you're doing horror films. Horror films are fun. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not even gonna lie about it. They're fun. They're fun to do. Yeah. And a friend of mine, whose name is Mustafa, actually, he and I kind of got together a few times and did horror films that got some attention. Universal does every year around Halloween time. Universal does a horror film festival. Nice. And we submitted a short horror film that we did years ago that was got second place. It didn't get first, but there were 3 judges. 2 judges selected the film that actually won, and the one judge that selected our film was actually Rob Zombie. You don't know who Rob Zombie is? Yes? No?
No.
So he was sort of one of these like shock rockers way back in the day, but then he became a filmmaker, and he's a world-renowned horror film maker.
Okay.
and I'm drawing a
And his
blank
last
on
name
the.
is his last name is Zombie.
I don't think that's his real last name. I highly doubt that. But he's known as Rob Zombie. Google him. He's very, very well known. Very well known.
Okay. I'll check him
So
out.
for him to have selected our film as the best film was to us was more of an honor in the horror film world than actually winning first place.
Right.
And then we did another one called Jinn, and that one our community loved that one. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. Actually,
Yes.
no. There was a lot of people in our community who did like it and they did enjoy.
Oh wait,
it.
so you were behind that film? I remember.
There's a lot of
hearing about
films.
it.
There was a lot of films that came out around the same time as ours called Jinn. It was like 3 or 4 films that were all called Jinn. So
Okay.
I don't know if you're the one that you're thinking of was
The
ours.
one that was in Detroit.
We did not film in Detroit. No, we filmed everything here in California.
Okay, then never
Yeah.
mind. Because there was one I remember the trailer was again a little cheesy, but like
Right. Yeah, that one came out about a little bit less than a year after ours. Yeah.
Okay.
But ours did well. We submitted that to through some horror film festivals, and it did well. It won some. It won scariest film at somewhere in, I think, in the Bay Area in California. It did well. I think it was in a New York horror festival as well. So done a few horrors that are really just honestly just kind of fun. But again, those are some of the films that also got me a lot of attention as a filmmaker because the stories were engaging and interesting and unique. And I always use our background as Arabs or our beliefs as Muslims to inform the stories that I tell, whether they're political or social or horror or comedy or whatever it is. So I used that, and because I was able to use our legends and lore and beliefs to tell this horror story, it was unique. It was something that people had never seen before. So it did well in the horror festival circuit. And like I said, they're fun. They're fun. I let my kids watch them too. I explain to them.
Where can people
It's not
watch
scary
them?
when I tell my kids, here, look at this horror film, because they were on set watching us put the fake blood, and it's
Yeah.
So,
Where can people
like,
watch?
I remember when when you guys did that scene, So
Where can people watch the films?
Jinn is on. I believe it's on Amazon. You could. It's
Amazon Prime,
Jinn,
okay.
Jinn.
Yeah.
You could look it up, and it's me and Mustafa Ashanzada is my co-conspirator in that in that project. We co-wrote, co-directed, co-produced. So that's where that one is. You were asking about what are the sort of the biggest and most successful projects that I've done.
Yes.
The biggest and most successful ones that I've done haven't been released yet, and that's the thing is that ask me next year, and the biggest films that I would have done would be the films that I'm working on next year. So I would hope so, right? I would hope that every project that I work on is bigger and more successful than the one prior to it. So right now I have a handful of projects that are very ambitious and have financiers behind them and networks behind them, and they're doing really well. So some of them got put on hold because of COVID and everything.
Yeah.
But that doesn't diminish from the degree of or the scale of the projects that they are. I'm working on some amazing projects right now that very much overshadow anything else that I've ever done. Within the past, I would say within the past 2 years, I've done or have been working on a number of like really big projects that overshadow anything else that I had done previously.
That's amazing. I mean, I want to understand, I guess, for as a filmmaker, like how do you become streamlined to get the financial backing? Like, what is the process, I guess, to make that happen? Like, you have a story, you have a script, it's solid. Now, how do you get the financial backing, and how do you approach a studio to get it produced, etc.? Like, how does that work?
So you're talking about doing studio, or are you talking about doing independent film in terms of getting them financed?
So those are two different tracks.
They're very different things. Yeah, if you're talking about independent films, know people with money and go pitch your story to them. Anybody with money, it's what it is. Crowd funding works too. I know a lot of people that have actually financed their films entirely through crowdfunding.
That's right.
And they were able to make their films. Or independent, sources where you have people in the community or people who and you just pitch them. And usually you can. I know people who have gotten it $100K or $50K even to do an independent film just through crowdfunding or through going to their own personal resources and friends and family and whatever. And I know people who have gone all the way up to probably a couple million.
Wow.
and have been able to do it through that source. Now you're talking about going through studios. Get an agent.
That's the
Get an
only way.
agent, or just know the right people, or sure, you can send your script over to Netflix or Paramount or whoever else, and that script will sit with the billion other scripts that they received that week.
Yeah.
And a lot of studios don't even take unsolicited scripts.
Oh, really?
Most don't. Most of the big ones don't take unsolicited.
Right. It has to be through like the system of.
It's got to be through the system. And how do you get in the system? Know people. You have to have an agent? No. Just like I said about with one of your first questions is how do you become a filmmaker? Well, there's not one way. There's 100 ways. How do you get into the studio system? Same thing. It's 100 different ways. One way is through an agent. One way is just knowing the right people. One way is getting discovered through all of a sudden, you have a YouTube thing and it blows up and now they come to you. And there's no one way to do it. There's 100 different ways that you can get, a script or a story or whatever, looked at by the studios. I'm on the cusp of it. I'm right there.
Yeah.
So, but it's,
and
my
awesome.
journey was just through, blood, sweat, and tears, and just, again, just trying to find the right project to get in front of the right person at the right time,
Right. That's what it is. Like just, being at the right place at the right time with the right people.
With the right project.
With the right project. Yeah.
I got a story for you, if you don't mind me sharing it.
Of course.
So a few years back, I thought I had the most brilliant story ever. That this is it. This is the one. I was telling my friends and family about it. This is the one that's gonna break me into mainstream. And I had a contact through a friend of mine to pitch to someone who worked at a studio. And it was a casual pitch. It wasn't an official pitch. It was just like a lunch meeting and things like that. So my friend introduces me to this gentleman who's a producer, and we sit down in this cafe, and he's like, "Okay, so I hear you have a good story. Let me hear what you got." And like 30 seconds in, this guy is checking his phone, looking around, looking at his sandwich, picking at his fries, and I'm just like, I lost this guy. I lost this guy. 30 seconds into my pitch, I completely lost him. I'm like, he's clearly not. That's it. He's not biting, And I was like, okay, that's it. This is a bust. That's it. In my mind, I'm thinking I'm never going to have another opportunity. That's it. And I'm chatting with him, and he gave me whatever little advice he could. I think he was just being polite, honestly. I think he hated my concept. And in retrospect, it was overdone. It was too convoluted. It was too forced. It was not a good idea, even though I thought at the time it was brilliant. And he let me down gently and gave me some advice, and then started asking me just about myself. And I started telling him little anecdotes and little stories and little fun things about my childhood and my upbringing and this and that. And I had him completely engaged. I had him locked in. Eye contact, laughing, asking me questions, leaning in. I had him just telling him these stories. And one of the stories that I told him, he was like, "That's the story right there. That's the story. I want to hear that story." I'm like, "No, that's just a silly thing that happened to me way back when." He was just like, No, I want to know more about that. He was like, "You need to write that. Go write that, and then call me again." So I'm like, okay, cool. And I don't know if he thought I would actually do it, but I did it. I went and did it, and I really sunk my teeth into this concept, into this idea, and I ran with it. And it actually became not a concept for a film. It turned into a concept for a series. And I spent a long time developing a series, and I pitched it to an independent producer who then financed it to put a full pitch together, and even to do a pilot episode. I went back to that same producer years later, and I told him, this was like 2-3 years later. I told him, "You inspired me. Remember this story?" And I think he was just being polite. He was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember." He didn't remember. I don't even think he remembered me. But he still was very, very polite. He said, "Yeah, let's meet again." I sent him the pitch, and he was like, "This is amazing." He wanted to do it. And we were actually, that's one of the projects that kind of got put on hold because of COVID. Gotcha. But it got his attention. It got other networks' attention, other producers' attention. And it's turned into a huge project that came from a failed pitch meeting.
Right.
So
again, you never know.
Right place, right time. At that time, I thought I had a brilliant, genius concept that, again, in retrospect, was trash. But it led to me being sort of inspired or encouraged or motivated by this gentleman to write this other story. And that's one right now that once things start to open up a bit, we're going to go out and pitch again. There were agents that were interested in the project. There were networks and studios that were interested in the project. So we're going to get back on top of it with that one. But like I said, it came from a failed pitch meeting on a different project entirely.
That's amazing.
You never know
how things happen, right?
Yeah.
Just another, I guess, follow-up, just in general, like what is it experiences? Is it just like everyday life, like where do you pick up to find different stories to tell,
Oh,
and how you
life.
tell it?
Life, real life. Even if you're doing sci-fi, the stories come from real life. The
Mm-hmm.
environment might not be real life. It might be on, whatever planet you're making up or whatever alternate reality. Westeros is not real, right?
Yeah.
But those characters are real.
Mm-hmm.
Those characters are real. For any Game of Thrones fans out there, I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones. Love the show. Love the books even more.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantasy. It's not real. Westeros is not a real place, but those characters, the way they behave, the way they interact with each other, their quirks, their loves, their hates, their fears, their hopes, their dreams, real.
Yeah.
All that stuff is real. So, and then you develop those characters as real people with real hopes and dreams and fears and hates and whatever else, and then you put them in whatever reality you want to put them in. You want to put them in a very realistic context. Sure, you want to put it in a context of 100 years ago. Okay, you want to put it in a complete fantasy world. Okay, but if your characters are real, people will be engaged, and if their struggles are relatable, then people will be engaged. So where do I draw inspiration? Just life, real life, people around me. Experiences that I see, experiences that I go through myself, or that I hear that others went through. If I'm touched by something, if I'm moved by something, well, it's most likely going to move other people too.
Mm-hmm.
So if I hear a story about someone who struggled in a certain way and did a certain thing, I'm like, wow, that really affected me, that really impacted me in a certain way. Okay, well, other people are going to be impacted by it too. So I would become inspired by that, whatever it was that moved me, to take that story and mold it and shift it and whatever, and move other people with it too.
That's amazing. I mean, that is something that is one of my weakest suits, is I guess the screenwriting, or just writing in general. Like I'm more all about the technical things. Like if somebody tells me a story, I know how to present it, versus trying to come up with a story by myself. But
so you make a good team with somebody. I'm the opposite. I'm all about developing characters and story arcs and things like that. You stick a camera in my hand and you're gonna get garbage. I've never been a good cinematographer ever.
We need a
that's yeah, exactly. You collaborate. That's where collaboration comes in. And then if you ask me, for example, okay, this character, this is the personality, this is the backstory, this is whatever else, and then you ask me, for example, what is the character wearing? I don't know. But there are other people who are brilliant art directors or production designers that would say, no, the character needs to be wearing this to inform that, and it actually enhances what I'm trying to say with my character. Or with you, if you're more on the technical end, well, you want to light the scene a certain way because it's going to enhance the story. That's the thing with all of these things, is that if I have an amazing story with amazing characters, but it all looks bland, I'm going to capture a certain audience that only cares about the story. But it's if you come in with your talent and your capabilities and you make it look a certain way, all that's doing is enhancing the characters or the story or the arc or whatever it is that I'm trying to do. So it's filmmaking is a highly collaborative art form, and anybody who thinks
100%.
that they can do it on their own, you're fooling yourself. So you have to collaborate. You have to form good partnerships, good team members. Good if you look at all the greats, they've all done it. They've all done it. Tarantino is
of course,
with
Nolan and Spielberg and
all of them have their buddies that they
right. It's all the same
stories.
The same team, yeah, because
You
they all
see the
get
same
each
team,
other, yeah.
And
100%.
they all enhance each other's crafts.
Yeah.
You might be able to put an amazing scene together that looks awesome, but there's no story. I'm not saying there isn't.
Right.
Just,
No. I mean, there is truth in that. I mean, I can make something look amazing, but without the why, like what's the driving force? Like there is no story, right? And that's something that I just naturally lack in. And I'm trying to work on it. I'm reading books and things like that.
Sure, but see, here's the thing: is though, know your strengths and then know your weaknesses. That's a piece of advice that I took a long time ago, and I ran with it, and I give that advice. It's good to know your strengths, but I think it's more valuable to know your weaknesses, because once you know your weaknesses, you can do one of two things: you can either work on it and get better at it, or you take the approach that I take, which is just get other people to do it.
And
I don't care to become a better cinematographer. That's just me. I don't
see that. That's
no
my
interest,
approach. Is like I personally don't want to be an official screenplay writer. However, I want to understand it, so that way when I do collaborate, I can get it.
Exactly, and that comes with knowing your way. So I know, for example, with me, I know that one of my weaknesses is cinematography. So I took a cinematography class, and I understood what cinematographers do. I know how they do their craft. I'm still not good at it, but I understand it well enough to be able to communicate and collaborate well with a cinematographer so that they can help and, again, enhance the story. So with you, yeah, absolutely understand writing, understand character, understand story arc, understand all of those different things. But at the end of the day, if you don't really care or you're not interested in honing your craft in that area, great. Then what you do is you make other people do it. You know, or not make, you understand what I mean. You get other people. It's efficiency. So rather than spending all this time and effort and energy trying to get something that you're either not good at or not interested in or whatever else, just collaborate with other people who are good at it and are interested in it. And then you end up complementing each other's skill sets. So this is why you said, like, you and I should collaborate.
Absolutely.
Man, I could show you some of the stuff that I shot myself. Years. I haven't even held a camera in years. Probably maybe 11 or 12 years the last time I actually camera opt on anything that like I actually shot.
I remember
they're terrible. They look terrible. The stuff I shot was horrible.
But see, I remember back in the day, because I was all about like, the cameras and like the lights and the gear and whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I think even as a kid, you probably knew more about that stuff than I did.
Probably.
You're talking to me about like f-stops and stuff. I'm like, I don't even know what an f-stop is until now.
That's the thing. I remember you had the Canon XL2
XL2,
camera.
I still have it somewhere in the garage.
It's beautiful. It was a beautiful camera, even though it was for DV tape, but it was revolutionary that it shot in actual 24p, right?
Yeah.
So you have the film like qualities. So that's something I kind of want to. I know we're a little bit going over our time here.
Oh,
but
sorry.
No, you're fine. I just don't want to take away from your time.
No, I'm good.
But what I want to talk about, I guess, next is I feel like. And this is just in my professional opinion. Like, I feel like there's just been this wave of people who understand the technicalities of, making the film look, but it still does not come across as a film, right? When they're creating, their piece. So it still looks like a video with, film-like qualities, or did you want to call it cinematic?
Sure.
Which I hate.
Buzzword.
It's buzzword, right? But it's like, and what I deducted was, or rather deduced, was that what it comes down to is the intention. Everything in a film is intentional. From the camera move, from the lighting, from the costume design, from the dialogue, from like every single aspect is intentional. It's deliberate. It's not accidental. Versus where I see like, a video, it's like randomized and put together and spliced up to make it look really cool and edgy and trendy and whatever, but it does not push a story. It doesn't convey an emotion, for the audience to feel.
Right. That's okay though. That's a person honing their craft and working on their skill and trying different things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you have no idea what you're doing. It looks cool and you don't even know why it looks cool, and it just that's fine. I think that's part of learning. That's part of the learning experience and honing your craft. I mean, I could say the same thing, not so much in the cinematography world, but with writing or developing stories. I would spend days or weeks developing a character that okay, it's not working. Why isn't this working? I don't know why it's not working, but it's just not working.
It doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right for whatever reason, and then it ends. Oh well, it's because it's forced, or it's because it's I didn't set this thing up in order to pay it off at this, whatever it is. So it's all part of the process. Again, I'm pushing this idea of collaboration a lot, is because it really does. Collaborating with people who are good at things that you're not good at help you to get better at what you are already good at. So if I know this shot looks good, but I don't know why. Okay, well, let me give you an amazing story where you could use that shot to enhance the story, and now you know why it's a good shot.
Right.
And now it's working within this context. Something might be an amazing shot, but not for that story. So sometimes the best shot is just plain, just straight, it looks boring, but within the context of that story, it works because maybe you're going for boring. Maybe the character, I don't know, for whatever reason, there's a motivation.
Right. There's always motive behind it.
There's always motive. So it's not always about looking cool, right? It's what emotion are you trying to convey? What what's the, and it's not just the cinematography, it's the music,
Oh yes. The score.
I was working with a composer once on a project where we just could not find the right tone to capture the mood and emotion of the scene. We just couldn't. We couldn't. And then he calls me one day. He was like, "You got to come in and hear this." I'm like, "Okay." So I came in, and I'm watching it, and the music is going, and then the moment came where we just couldn't find the right thing, and then the moment came, and I was like, "Oh my God, I felt it! I finally felt what we've been going for this whole time." I was like, "What did you do?" And he was like, "Listen again, really careful." So I listened again. I'm like, "There's nothing there." He's like, "Exactly." He removed the music entirely.
Oh,
For this
wow.
good maybe 20-second gap where we just couldn't find something that would capture the right mood. What captured the right mood was
Silence.
nothing. Was silence. It was silence helped to capture the mood that we were going for. And this guy's he's a brilliant composer, and being a brilliant composer includes knowing when to not have music. It doesn't mean you fill it wall to wall with, and I think that's the thing that a lot of folks do in whatever their craft is. Cinematographers will tend to sort of overdo things when they're, because you just learned how to do a lens flare, so you want to throw a lens flare everywhere. And it's the same thing with writing or with anything else. Like I learned how to do whatever in terms of character development, and now every single one of my characters has this thing, and it's like, okay, it's part of the process. You're learning, but eventually through working with others, you start to realize how and when and where to use your tools, and how to misuse them, and how to break the rules. That's one of the things I love to do is breaking storytelling rules or cinematic rules, but you don't do it just for the sake of breaking it. There has to be a motive behind it. There has to be a reason why you're breaking.
Intention, yes.
There has to be intention behind it. It can't be like, well, why is the shot out of focus? Well, I was going for the lack of focus of the character. Like, no, man, you didn't get your spot right. That's all that don't.
Sometimes I see that even in like blockbusters, like the million-dollar projects, and I see these mistakes, and it's like, is that just human error, or like because sometimes I'll see shots, they're just out of focus, or you'll see the shadow of a camera, or like all these technical
shadow
things.
of a camera is probably just a mistake. But out of focus could be a mistake, and it could be motivated. I don't know. I've seen it motivated before. I mean, the classic one, sort of the cliche one, is if somebody gets knocked out or faints or something like that, and when they're coming back into reality and they're waking up again, what is the shot starts out of focus from their POV, and then it slips back into focus. That's one way that the shot can be out of focus, but it's still motivated. There's a lot of ways that you can sort of break rules, whether it's in storytelling or cinematography or whatever it is. Like I said, I think the point that we were trying to make is that it doesn't always have to look amazing. It doesn't always have to look cool. It doesn't always have to be the best, whatever. If you're a production designer, decorate the room with this and this and that. Well, maybe the story calls for an empty room. I don't know. It depends. What's going to inform the story? What's going to enhance the mood? What's going to enhance the emotion? What's going to get your audience to feel a certain way? Not that looks amazing.
Yeah.
It's what's going to make it look and feel and sound the way that you need it to capture whatever emotion you're going for in that moment. And it changes moment to moment.
Yes, I've talked about this many times in previous videos that at the end of the day it's all about story. If it doesn't serve the story, there is no purpose behind it.
Right.
And so just I guess wrapping up, the last question I have, and you've been sprinkling this in throughout this amazing conversation, and again, I'm really grateful for you, taking the time for being on here. But any advice for any upcoming filmmakers in our generation?
Like one piece of advice? No.
Just one.
I don't have like one. It's just it's all of the stuff that we've been talking about. It's learn your craft, hone your craft, know your shortcomings and weaknesses, and either work on them or get other people to fill them for you. Network like crazy. Get to know people in the industry. Try to network upwards also. Like, there's nothing wrong with collaborating with folks that are at your level or even below.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like I said earlier, I always learn from, I've learned from fresh film school grads all the time, from kids. I'll be working with kids, and I'll learn something from them. But networking is huge. It's key. Collaborating. And just knowing that, like, I guess the biggest mistake that I made in terms of storytelling is just, don't beat me over the head with your message. Be subtle with it. People connect with people. Like I said, they don't connect with a cause. They don't connect with a message. We connect with other people and other people's struggles. So don't be so heavy-handed. And I'm speaking specifically to our community, because our community, folks in our community, I'm guilty, by the way. I did it too. And I learned how to not do it the hard way by doing it over and over and over again. Don't be so heavy-handed. Don't try to shove your message down my throat or your audience's throat, whatever that message is, even if it's something you're super, super, super passionate about. If your cause is, humanitarian, situation in Syria, for example, sure, tell that story, send that message, but send it to me in a way where I can connect and relate to the characters as a human being, with their struggle, not as here's what's going on and you need to feel bad and you need to sympathize with this, and it's you're gonna lose me that way. You're gonna be preachy or spoon feeding me your message, and you're gonna lose me. Or even if you don't lose me, you're gonna, who you're gonna get is you're gonna get the people who already agree with you.
Right.
And if
preaching to the choir.
You're preaching to the choir, yeah, exactly. But with that approach, you're just gonna get people who already agree with you to like that video. If it's something online, for example, people who don't agree with you or people who are indifferent, you're gonna lose them. How are you gonna get them? You're gonna get them by making characters and stories that they can relate to. And characters and stories that, and you do that with subtlety, and you do that with relatability, and you do it with, just making real human, complex, nuanced characters. Meaning that your good guys can do bad things, and your bad guys can have good intentions, and and things like that. I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but I was working on a story, and it ended up unfortunately not going anywhere at the time, but where we had talking about the Syrian conflict, where we had two people who were on opposite ends of the Syrian conflict, and I started the story off with one person looking and appearing like the good guy, and the other person looking and appearing like the bad guy, and then you start to see the lines blur. Because these are human beings at the end of the day. I wasn't trying to say this side is right and this side is wrong, or this side is right and this side is wrong. I was trying to say these are human beings. They're all human beings, and they all struggle, and they all have, whatever their political affiliations are. They all have families, and they all bleed, and they all cry, and they all love, and they all hate, regardless of where they stand on a certain political issue. So, through telling a story that way, I may be able to capture the attention of someone who doesn't necessarily agree with me on an issue, and get them to maybe even just engage in a dialogue. Where otherwise, if I was just like, this side is right, this side is wrong, this side is, the victim, this side is bloodthirsty criminals, the people who already agree with me are going to love it. Nobody else is going to care.
Right.
So be nuanced, be complex, because human beings are complex, and collaborate and network with others. That's a very long. I tend to be long-winded, so I'm sorry. That's a very long-winded way of answering your very simple question.
But thank you again. And bro, this has been an honor. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and with your presence and knowledge. I really do appreciate it, man.
Well, it was my pleasure, man. And to all of your audience, good luck with your filmmaking. Do it. Work with each other. Collaborate with this guy. He's good. And collaborate with each other, and tell amazing stories. Because like I said earlier, if we're not telling our own stories, nobody's going to tell them. Do your thing.
Dude, bro. Thank you so much. And I'll be right with you in just a minute. Thank you so much. All right, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this live stream of Real Time, where we are live talking about film and television and everything in between. If y'all did enjoy it, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you hit that post notification down below. Make sure you check out Murad's work. I have a few of his links in the description as well. And this is Mustafa Talib with Filmmaking Productions, signing off, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out.